Welcome, everyone. This is Kristen Vincent, Chair of the Westborough School Committee. Today is Wednesday, September 8th, 2021. This meeting of the Westborough School Committee is called to order. Please stand if you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for joining us this evening. We are in the town hall, so if anyone is looking for us, the meeting is posted over at Memorial Hall at the Forbes building, but we needed to switch locations tonight, so here we are. Thank you for joining us this evening. Anyone attending the school committee meeting tonight is welcome to wear a mask, and unvaccinated individuals are strongly advised to wear masks. I'd like to notify everyone in the room with us tonight that this meeting is being recorded by Westborough TV. School committee meetings are available for remote viewing or listening on Westborough TV's government channels Verizon 28 and Charter 192, and online on the Westborough TV YouTube channel. A recording of this meeting will be posted on the YouTube channel shortly after this meeting. Thank you to Westborough TV for covering the broadcast tonight. And we have with us tonight Superintendent Amber Bach, Assistant Superintendent Dr. Daniel Mayer, Director of Finance and Administration David Gordon, Vice Chair of the Westborough School Committee Steve Durrett, School Committee members Sarah Dulay, Lisa Edinburgh, and Raghu Nandan, our Student Representative Andrew Chen, and our Recording Secretary Jen Benton. And there is staff from Westborough TV handling the broadcast and recording of this meeting tonight. Our agenda for this meeting is as follows. We'll have approval of minutes from August 30th regular session. Then we will have superintendent's report, assistant superintendent's report, director of finance and administration's report, then school committee member reports. We'll have building project updates, citizens requests. We'll have an enrollment update and look at the sections that we have so far in our enrollment. We will look at a schedule for budget review. We will vote on a biennial review and affirmation of a head injury policy. We will vote on an update to policy GBAA. We will update on district proposals for the allocation of the participation in the American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA funds. We will vote to reappoint the superintendent to the Assabet Valley Collaborative School Committee Board. We will look at the external audit that was done for the student activities account and get a report for that. And we will vote to approve an annual approval of student activities fees. So lots of housekeeping and business happening tonight. So we'll start with the approval of minutes. We need to approve minutes from August 30th regular session. Motion?
I can make a motion to approve the minutes from August 30th.
Thank you. Second. Thank you, Steve. Any discussion? All right, all in favor? 5-0, those minutes are approved. So we'll turn our attention to the superintendent. Welcome.
Good to see all of you tonight. So we had, I hope that those that were celebrating Rosh Hashanah had a sweet New Year and family time and meaningful celebrations. We, of course, had then no school yesterday, and today we're greeting students on their return. So it's always kind of both nice and unsettling when you're running like partial weeks. Like there's something that's very nice about the slow, steady start. We had 3 days last week. We'll have 3 days this week, and then next week I think we have 4. Like it's like it takes us a slow and ready start. So today for kindergartners, it probably felt like the first day of school again. Mm-hmm. You know, for those that aren't, and whereas high schoolers, they flow right back in and enjoy those extended weekends. It really has been overall a smooth start. Buses ran again today. Well, we're really looking at mostly right now, do we have a kind of a steady stream of drivers? If you look at like what the national news has been. And so the good news is here in Westborough that we've had drivers available. Runs have gone smoothly. Traffic in town has not been really too unmanageable yet. It will peak and will be problematic at some point, but in the early days, it's nice when the traffic isn't too heavy, we can get the routes ironed out. It's to be anticipated for parents that, you know, it's going to take us a couple days to even out the timing of the routes. Everybody has to be patient. Really appreciate you understanding that, and if you have questions, to email Cindy Crowley. We also had last week, I think it was Thursday night, I attended the Athletics Fall Parents Night, where they provide information on the opening of the athletic season, answer questions. The energy there was very positive and at a great turnout. Again, in person, everyone masked indoors, very compliant, and really positive evening. And our athletic seasons are off and running. And you'll start to see events, coming into the calendar, and the first up are our open house nights. So I want to speak to the fact that the first up tomorrow is the high school, and they will be providing a modified evening where they're requesting one parent per child. If you have more than one child, you can divide and conquer, and each of you follow one of the schedules. You can flip halfway, whatever matters works for you, but we are requesting just one parent that evening. Our goal is to reduce the overcrowding, and it basically assures us that teachers are experiencing the same classroom setting they have with their students, and it doesn't really overcrowd the space. They will also encourage that everyone, of course, has to have masks to enter. We'll have extra masks should anybody forget them, and we're really looking forward to the same positive energy of just a return to normalcy that has been kind of the feel of the fall thus far. From there, we move into K-3 buildings. They were organizing today to think through a modification to their open house evening. They will run a split session. So they'll split it by alphabet, and they'll split the time, so they'll shorten the amount of time for each tour, but provide like a half hour for one part of the alphabet, a 10-minute transition time for parking lots to move, and then another half hour available for students and families to come and do the traditional tour and enjoyment, to do the opportunity to greet the teachers and to see the flow of the classroom, which again is a ritual that kids really enjoy, bringing their parent in and giving them the tour of their space. So that should feel not crowded again. It'll be masked, and it should be a typical evening, but it'll just take the weight off of the numbers. Again, then when you look at grades 4 to 7, they'll echo the planning of the high school and do one parent per child. So more information on each of those will be coming out from your child's building. With any specificity that you need, you can contact the school. All right, so really looking forward to that. That's always an important benchmark to the start of the year. And other than that, we'll be just continuing to ramp up. So that's my report for tonight.
All right, thank you. Daniel.
Good evening. I'm going to save my report to go over the enrollment numbers in a little bit.
Okay, thank you. And Dave, anything now? I know you have some stuff.
Good evening. Just a brief report,
Okay.
update on, just wanted to follow up on the food service comment from last meeting. We have no reports, working closely with our new food service director, Jacob Martin. Things seem to be going smooth. He is continuing to be very flexible and make modifications to any menu items that he receives, either comments, suggestions, or insights from schools or community members. So for right now, food service is going well, and we're off to a good start, and we'll continue to monitor that. Just another update would be about the business office. Staffing changes, things are going in the right direction. We have figured out how to manage operations short-staffed. We're hopeful that our payroll person will return soon from her leave, and we are looking and posting positions and hope to fill those. But in the interim, we are maintaining quality work, high level of customer service, and look forward to a stronger staff and a broader team to expand the duties.
Thank you, and thank you to your team for carrying on all the work that's in that busy office.
Just a reminder too, I think it's a change for a lot of families to recognize that we have a breakfast program available in all of our schools. And I think that it's perfectly appropriate for a student to go, even if they eat breakfast at home, to go ahead and go have a second breakfast, grab an extra that they can use for a snack later. But that food is ready and available for every family in Westborough, and so our students need to continue to feel comfortable accessing that. I think it takes time for them to get used to that. So I just want to publicly acknowledge that that's just a real benefit for us that we want to take advantage of for the year.
Yeah, Steve.
David, one of the things that happens every year is the choice of teachers as to how they get paid, whether they get paid all within the school year for their total year, or
Yep.
whether they separate it over the summer.
Yep.
Obviously, you're probably well into that process.
Yep.
But I just thought I'd bring it up and see whether you have any comments about how that's working out.
Yeah, currently, any staff member that have requested changes to their staffing plan, to their salary plan or the disbursement plan, we take those emails, we use those as backup and then make the adjustments. As of right now, it's a very small number. I don't think actually anybody has actually come forward to make any changes. The majority of staff are paid on the 26 pay cycles.
Yeah. The only reason why I bring it up is that I think at the last meeting, we were talking about a significant number of new hires
Yep.
this year.
Yep.
And, whether they figure it out by osmosis or whether there's an email in their box
Yep.
On that issue, that's my only point.
Yeah, the onboarding, we provide them with the options, and depending on which position they're hired for, the bargaining unit may elect to do certain things different ways. But yes, we provide that at the onboarding and message
Okay.
that clearly.
We usually hear more about it in about a month's time.
Yeah.
Thought I'd give you a heads
Right.
up to
Yes.
stay
Right
ahead
now.
of it.
Right now, all is clear.
Okay, I had a suggestion about the breakfast option. I think a lot of students actually don't know about that option, so I'd recommend sending out an email to students or family members, just telling them that breakfast is an option, so that we have more people participating in that program.
No, I appreciate that, Andrew. I think we can definitely do both a family and student push, because I think communicating directly to high schoolers that they can go down and access that on their way in is very helpful. And yes, it's fine to go get a second breakfast. So I definitely will, thank you.
I did see some, I think I saw online one of the parent group Facebook pages, someone asking what is the logistics? If my kid's getting off the bus at Mill Pond and, they have to wait in a certain area, but how, when do they go pick up that breakfast? So maybe it's
Yeah, no,
a
it's interesting.
building.
I think we can put together some individual school-based communications
that's
on
what I'm
that, because I
thinking.
was at Gibbs, and when the kids were rolling off the bus, they were either peeling off to the auditorium, going towards the kitchen, or, going
Yeah.
to the gym. So,
Yeah.
and we were like, we want food, go that way. And so I think they're finding it out, but I think
Yep.
over-communicating would be really good. So
Yeah, I
thank
think
you.
that's a good idea. And just, I know the logistics at every building is different, so it's a good idea.
We can talk about that at
Yeah.
WMT tomorrow.
And Andrew, I'm going to turn it over to you because I know you probably have some news from the schools, although Ms. Bach may have taken your thunder with the open houses. But
Yeah, so overall, students have transitioned pretty smoothly into the new school year. The high school had their much-awaited senior parade on the first day of school, which also, despite some traffic, that went pretty smoothly. So at Fails, the kindergartners enjoyed popsicles on the playground event at Bay State Commons, and like Mrs. Bach mentioned, the open houses, those are coming up, and the Phil students are excited to move into their new school November 15th, and finally there's Armstrong is having a Scholastic book event planned later for September.
great. What's going on? Sarah, anything to share?
Not too much, just everything's, feels very exciting right now. There's a lot going on, too much going on. I'll mention, we all got a reminder here, so I'll just mention it. The Borough Sugar Shack is having an open house this Sunday, September 12th, from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. All are welcome. Sweet samples, kids' games, activities, raffles, things like that. And so everyone knows the Borough program is our 18 to 22 program, provides life skills and career readiness training to students who are making the transition to adulthood. So everyone come out and support their endeavor, which is the Sugar Shack candy store.
Yep, and I heard there might be some guest character appearances there. The younger kids might enjoy that, and maybe behind-the-scenes tours and stuff. So should be really fun.
Yeah. That's all I have.
Rhonda, do you have anything?
No, nothing for today.
Lisa?
I just have one thing, and that is that one of our seniors, Shinya Hanji, is representing Massachusetts in the 2022 Special Olympics. And it was announced in June, and he has a year to train for it. And then he'll be going to Orlando, Florida to compete. it's pretty exciting.
He
and
might, I might need to go as a chaperone.
I think it's right.
Yeah,
I know.
I think he's swimming.
So it is pretty exciting, and I feel like it was at the very end of last year when it was announced, Mr. Callahan announced it on the field, and it made a little bit of news, and I meant to report it, but then June. It was a busy time. So I'm announcing it now, and I'm very excited for him, and I just wanted to wish him well in his training, and we look forward to hearing how that goes next summer.
That's awesome. Thank you.
He is a senior at Westborough High School.
And Steve, anything to share now, or you want to wait for
I'll wait.
building project updates?
Keep everybody on their chair.
Yes, I'm super excited. Yeah, why don't we just go right into that, because I don't really have anything to share. I mean, the schools, everything is up and running, and it's busy time. Do you have something?
I wanted to add before we move into that, I thought Lisa would get me there because she always has the update on it. That's okay, the 9/11 ceremony in the
yeah.
community, it's the 20-year anniversary, and I wanted to wait and give you a chance to do
No,
it.
I'm going,
Um,
and I'm going
So,
to the event, so
on Saturday, there will be a service that will be held at the fire station, and I'm gonna have to pull the time. I'm
It
not
starts
sure.
at 8:30.
It starts at 8:30. It's really, I've attended it over multiple years. This year, they're adding some additional reflections. We have some students that will be participating with some music, and I think it should be a really meaningful ceremony, and certainly encourage people to find space that day, even if you don't attend the ceremony. Like, I know I'm gonna be away this weekend, but we've already thought about finding a place to make sure that we go and reflect. I think it's a very significant moment. So just hope that people will take some time and come down, because we have a community that does such a good job recognizing just so many important events. And I think the fire department, police department, and the schools have worked together to pull together a nice event. And the selectmen have helped select board did a nice job planning. So I just encourage everybody to go.
Thank you for that. And for those of you that don't know, there is a 9/11 memorial at the fire station that includes a piece of a steel beam from one of the World Trade Towers. So definitely encourage everyone to kind of stop by there at some point this weekend and just take some time to remember. So thank you. Thanks. Speaking of steel beams.
Yeah, well, I was trying to drum up the expense, but I have to, not expense, sequence of things, but tomorrow is my anniversary. And so today, I was with Gretchen in Boston Harbor, and I didn't make the meeting this afternoon. So I have to actually restate stuff from last week, and I'll find out what's really going on tomorrow. But right now, we believe we're on schedule for fails. And of course, the schedule changed as a result of our decision as a school building committee to save money for the town and not force the building to be completed sometime in middle of September, which didn't serve any purpose. So as a result of relaxing the schedule, we saved the town $200,000 in overtime expense that, as I said, was not going to produce anything. And as was mentioned earlier, the school would be occupied, I think you said, the 15th of November, which is the weekend of Labor Day weekend. At least that's,
Veterans Day, yeah.
excuse me, Labor Day. Yeah, we already were at Labor Day.
We have a lot of holidays.
So, and I have no excuse for that. So anyway, the story is that we will finish the school. Everything that I'm aware of based on last week, we're on schedule for. The finish work is accelerating within the building. The solar panel rails are on the roof, and I think in one corner of the building they started putting panels up. In addition to that, the geothermal well system is done. Those wells have been tested. The internal mechanics have been tested to the extent that we can, and the fluids for the system were supposed to begin installing this week. Those of you who have driven by the school have probably seen the the parking lot, which was paved, base paved, with the curbing, and I'm sure anybody who's driven in there, because it's sort of attractive, you realize that the ramp on the other end is not a permanent part of the design. It is temporary because when the old school is demolished, additional parking will be created and the bus routes will change, and they'll come out the upper curb cut that exists now, but is basically fenced off and part of the construction project. So it's been an interesting, I guess, construction for many reasons. One, because it's a hillside. Two, because of issues that were required of us in terms of not having any parking on Eli Whitney. As a result of that, what used to be the ball field there, or play field, turned into not only a soil stockpile, but also parking for the construction people, as well as off-site parking that we as part of the town, through the school building committee, needed to bring people from the parking lot at the ball fields on near
Gates Field or,
yeah, near Sandra Pond.
Yeah.
And all of that has been worked out in the middle of the pandemic, and I can't thank the tradesmen more, because they have worked through many things, including some horrendous rains. And as you know, that hillside is unstable when it's not protected, and has been an issue in terms of trying to provide the best water quality off the site to satisfy the Conservation Commission. So there are other projects going on as well. One project in process at Hastings, which is the sprinkler system, and the other will be the HVAC system. We talked about this, seems like 100 years ago, but the engineering design for the HVAC is to be completed shortly, and that we hope to go out to bid. And you'll hear more about where the funds might come from for that project later on tonight. So it's been a very interesting project that fails, mainly because it's the toughest one, I think, that the school building committee has worked on, and with a lot of challenges. So if and when it actually comes to pass, as we hope it will on Veterans Day weekend, I got it right this time. And of course, I guess just as a follow-on, all the stuff that's in the old building has to move to the new building. And that means that everybody in the administration, the school system, the teachers, and other contractors will all be involved trying to move all that stuff from the old building into the new building to be able to start school again in the new building. So keep in mind that everybody is a player and everybody's a participant. And anyway, for that, thank you.
Thank you. And I know some people have asked, and Mr. Walsh just asked about having a public open house for when Fails opens. And since we're opening in the middle of the school year during COVID, probably won't be a big, everyone come on in and look around. I think we do hope to do some video walkthroughs. So number one, we could preview for the students what it'll look like when they get to the new sort of bigger building, and also just to share with the community the construction that's taken place. But at some point, we'll have to have some sort of welcome
We definitely
the
will.
community in, but
Yes.
in the middle of not when it's first shiny brand new, because we only, like Steve said, have a few days to move in and get the students, up to speed with
We'll
their new
definitely
routines,
stage a lot of opportunities, and we will have an appropriate celebration,
Yeah.
ribbon cuttings, stage different parts of finishing. So it's an important part of the community to have that come to fruition. And we also will be using that building. It's got a full-size basketball court,
Yep.
which we've been desperately looking to add one.
and the
Because
big
failed,
cafeteria
and then a
space.
beautiful cafeteria space, and then areas where we can offer, community education things. So we
Mhm.
look forward to that.
Yeah, the building is designed in a really smart way so that you could have the library as an event space, and people can just come in from up top, go to the library. You don't have to open up the whole school to
It's gonna be very
navigate
nice.
the
Yeah.
spaces. So
Yeah, thoughtful design.
yeah. Stay tuned. Thanks. Does anyone have any questions for Steve about the building projects or anything? Alright. This is the time in our agenda where we accept citizens' requests, so if there's anyone there, I don't see anyone here who would like to step forward.
Should we allow a delay for citizens' requests since they may have gone over to the other building and they may be on their way over?
Well, what
They
I'll
show up, we'll
say is
let
if
them
they
through.
show up, I give them the floor. Yes, that sounds good. Right, and we are ahead of schedule. So I think I'll turn it over to Daniel for looking at enrollment and update.
Sure.
It's been a busy enrollment season.
It has, yes. Every summer is kind of busy with ins and outs. And last year in particular, I mean, I think part of it was there were a lot of people who did opt out last year with COVID and did homeschooling. But the numbers have settled down a little bit, and I'm sure there'll still be some fluctuation over the next few weeks. But this is, I'll give you a summary of the global numbers and then also class size numbers here. So first of all, this box here or table here has got, you know, our district going back to 2007, 2008 school year. Where we're currently at is 3,897. That's our current enrollment. That's up 72 from last year, and last year was down 151 from the prior year. So you can see that, you know, dip down and then bouncing back up. And last week you had asked me at the school committee meeting about homeschool numbers, and you know, I said there's still a few that are homeschooling, but on average, we have like about 20 students, and we're at around 35. So there's like, you know, it's larger than it currently is on average, but that's not what's driving that number at this point. So let me just break it down a little bit more so you can see some class size data, because I know you're always interested in seeing that. Class size is cleanest at the elementary school because there's homerooms, and you know, so you have a certain number of sections at each grade level. So the way to, you know, you can see the K numbers are here and how many sections are down here, and then the class size is over here. So the most you know, sort of relevant thing just about class sizes is to look in this box here, and you can see our numbers are extraordinarily good. We had thoughtfully planned to have grade 1 and grade 2 be recovery years for students who were missing school last year. You know, the students who are new to us are kindergarten, obviously, but generally in kindergarten, there's a lot of prep work for getting the students ready to be able to learn to read in grade 1, and grade 2 is going to be, you know, sort of doing, to some degree, our philosophy, our thought prep process was they're going to be doing some cleanup and remediation where kids had missed grade 1, that, you know, sort of a critical year to learn how to read. So those two, as you could see by looking at the numbers, those two grade levels, grade 1 and grade 2, are somewhere in the neighborhood of 16 at grade 1, 16 or 17 per classroom, and grade 2. The same thing, you know, the Armstrong's slightly larger at 18, and Hastings is, you know, very, very nicely placed at 15, 14 or 15 per class. So grade 3 numbers are also terrific. They're, you know, 20 or lower, and 4, 5, 6, we kept those numbers low too. So we did hire, again, an additional teacher at Mill Pond to keep those numbers down, and 2 additional teachers, I believe, we hired at the K3 level.
Yeah.
That were COVID related, you know, using ESSER funds. So, you know, we're very pleased with those numbers. And if you're interested just in terms of reading the charts, you can see how many students are in each of the buildings and how many are in each of the grade levels. And again, this is your sectioning that gives you your class size, so you can see, you know, just because the numbers are really low in grade 2, it doesn't mean that it's you know, grade 2 is necessarily like the lowest size class that's got 282 students, there's just a lot of grade 2 sections, you know. In terms of Gibbons and Mill Pond, I mean, what happens there is the sections, you don't have homerooms, but you have, one-offs in terms of you travel to different, to your English class, your science class, your social studies, your language. So there are many more different sections of classes, so it's not just a self-contained homeroom. And so looking at Gibbons, one of the things I want to point out here, if you remember, they've had a bulge in enrollment over the last several years where Gibbons was up at mid-600s for a couple of years, and traditionally that school has been below 600, and this is the first time they're below 600 in the last 5 years. And so we had a couple of years where we had sections that were fairly high in the high 20s. Now with current staffing, we're in a much nicer place where the way to read this is there's only one section with 25 students, and there's one, and this is mainly the core subject classes, like PE classes tend to be a little larger, and the music classes, so there's an asterisk there that those are drawn out, so like chorus is not included in these. So, but there's one with 25, this is wrong. I have something wrong. I think it's 20, might be one that has 26 or 27.
Yeah.
I'll have to look at that. And then there's 5 with 25, and then there's 106 sections that have 25 or less students. At the high school, there's even more sections that are happening because you have levels and you have more electives. And again, but our numbers are in some cases not as they're higher than we want them to be. But when you look at how many different sections you're talking about, obviously it's substantially more than Gibbons in terms of if Gibbons there's only 6 that are like 25 or more. And here you have, if you add together those 3 categories there, it's 28 sections that are 25 with 25 or more students. But that's out of, a very large denominator. And so there's there's 446 sections that have between 10 and 24 students at the high school. So the odds that you're, going to have a lot of your classes be in the larger side are fairly low, although one of the things that happens for D-Wing students is because of the time of the day when all the D-Wing activities are happening in the middle of the day, there's some sections for those kids that travel to the D-Wing that are going to be larger for a number of students. So there will be some kids. So I guess what I would do now is, there's a lot of different things going on in the data, but on the whole, I would say, our class sizes are in very good shape. We would like them to be a little lower than they are in some of the high school sections. The concentration for those higher class size tend to be mainly some math, and I have not investigated and had a conversation yet with the principal over at the high school why they're disproportionately math. There's like 1 or 2 history and a few science.
Sometimes they double up too. So, math tends to be a section where they're doubling sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, from my experience, with math, this year was the first year they had 2 calculus BC classes. So yeah, and also regarding the population at the high school, the large number of kids can definitely be felt. For example, in past years, the student council has had their own room to design things and do activities and things. But this year, we've had to actually move and do all of our planning and stuff in the loading dock outside of school next to the dumpsters. So yeah, because they're using our old room as storage. So yeah, that's just something I wanted to bring up.
We'll have to talk to the principal about upgrading International Honor Society space.
I mean, it's possible that, I know we have had some storage, you know, there were a lot of storage issues during COVID of taking furniture out of the classrooms to keep the distancing, and then we had them in trailers, and so there may be some furniture that needs to still be moved around, but you should not be out on the loading dock. We'll see what we can do with that.
I'm sure Mr. Callahan is listening, so I'm sure he'll ding in on a text with an upgrade to your space, Andrew.
There's not a significant number more students this year than the previous year because the class that just left was comparable to the freshman class that just came in.
It's the last couple of years that the numbers have been a little higher. I mean, I'm sure it feels, you wouldn't have felt it last year because you were in the hybrid model, you know, and there were kids that were doing remote education, so you wouldn't have necessarily felt that there was a bulge in terms of enrollment. But, you know, the high school, going back a few years, they were down at like about 1,100, 1,130, and now the high school's up at towards it's almost 1,200. So it's, you know.
Yeah, I would expect the bulge from middle school.
Yeah.
If it's coming out into high school.
Yeah, and so it's been in the high school for a couple of years, and we've been adding sections at the high school so that, you know, those numbers, even though they you know, look high, they would have been much higher had we not. We added several sections in math, science, English, and social studies, and world language. So we did, you know, add, and so we did a good job of triaging on that. I mean, as a school district, to have that few numbers, I mean, yeah, I think we're doing pretty good.
I was saying, Andrew can attest to, also I have 3 high schoolers this year, and I know they all went back and forth several times with the vice principals over the summer with their schedules and electives and things like that, and this doesn't work and this works, and even 2 days before school, someone got an elective that they wanted and switched everything around. So I know there's a complex scheduling matrix, and I know they do try as best they can to give kids the classes that they want, and so that might pop another kid into a math class or something.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good reason to have.
No, I agree.
bigger
I
class.
do think I appreciate the shout out for the scheduling. I have seen few high schools schedule with the personal attention that they give to hand scheduling students into what they need and letting students develop independent coursework. We have faculty who will take on independent studies so that students can pursue something if it didn't fit in their schedule. So, you know, they're very committed to that personal experience, and I think I've gotten better and better at it. And I think it speaks to their sense that they care about the experience providing what students want. So I do think in terms of where we are, you know, we achieved what we wanted in sectioning. You got used to seeing high 20s across the board. These are much more normal class sizes for a district of our performance level, and certainly not small. They are appropriate and give us room to grow. We tend to take in students across the span of the year. We'll probably enroll steadily, you know, into elementary. It tends to be the area we pick them up during the year. And we have space that we don't start, like last year we added additional paras to sections that were over. So, you know, we really are in I think the most comfortable place in my tenure here, because when I arrived, we were in an enrollment crisis. So we were kind of had ourselves packed in. And so now we've been able to spread out and assign appropriate staffing. So you're starting to see the benefits of that. I think we'll continue to pace it and watch where we are, but I think you'll see that number, if you look at our original trajectory plan, slowly grow back towards 4,000, and that we'd hope we'd see that as our settle point, which would be really positive.
Can I just add on to Sarah's comments that, I had great experience with the Westborough High School, Mr. Callahan's staff and Mr. Callahan himself taking interest in making sure the kids got what they wanted, and you know, meeting with them personally and working with the kids to get to fill the gaps that were in the schedule.
No, I appreciate
can vote for
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they enjoy it. I just want to say they enjoy it. One of their favorite things is scheduling, because it gives them personal time with kids to hear their stories and to know what they want from the high school. And every time they get a chance to sit with a student and schedule, they're getting a picture of what they want their high school experience to be. and they experience that personal passion of desperation for a class. It's a motivator when you're sitting with a student up close and they're begging for their section. You know, they do really well. So I'm very, very pleased with the
And
way
it's
they
hard.
personalize it.
It's hard to meet that many kids'
It is.
expectations, so
It is, so,
totally.
thank you.
So since this is, I don't know if I should wait for budget schedule to come up to talk about budget when it comes to enrollment. Is this the time, or shall I wait?
I think that typically this is a preview of our current, and then the first, and again, when Dave goes through his budget timeline, you'll see that you'll get that first enrollment, which is where we roll everything over, and then we look at it. And Dan usually comes forward with a proposal for staffing that is related to budget then, and begins to preview that for you. I'm not sure we can do that in looking at these sections yet, but I know you like to try to roll them forward yourself and start
Yeah.
to look at the numbers, so.
I mean, something that Daniel brought up initially, or was, or you, I'm pretty sure it was Daniel who just said that the recovery period, the fact that our numbers look like this, is highly beneficial and coincidental, like, or not. Like, you know, when I think about how, as fate would have it, that we had bigger numbers in the senior class that just left, and there were these bubble classes that appear to be diminishing, that we grew into helping those groups, especially into the high school now, and the group that just left, especially when they were in Mill Pond and middle school. So the benefits are now helping the smaller groups, creating this, you know, almost the perfect scenario for recovering from COVID, where learning may have been, some of it may have been lost, or that it will really just be beneficial in so many ways. But at the same time, it affects our budget, and those small groups coming up, whether kindergarten increases, are pretty dramatic. Looking at the numbers, I mean, there's a differential between like 60 kids in a class compared to the highest bubble we've had, to now looking at much smaller groups. So I do think it's something to consider for next year's budget, in thinking about, is there a place where we can maneuver, you know, where it comes to the numbers, even though I think it's beneficial right now. I just think there's something to talk about, which is the numbers we've never seen in the last, I don't know, 7, 8 years, maybe longer, where we were talking about 25, 26s at Mill Pond. We were talking about many 25, 26s at Gibbs, and now seeing that it's pretty rare to see anything like that. We talked about it at some point, as Mill Pond looked like it was hovering around 23s, and now to see it lower, that it's something to consider when we talk about budget. So I just wanted to be on record as it feels like there's space. It seems like a lot of space for, it sounds terrible, but decreasing our staff. And I don't mean decreasing like we're gonna fire teachers. I mean,
It's a good problem to
when
have.
it's a good problem to have, you know, someone retires, so you don't rehire, you know, that type of transition where, you know.
Well, in a perfect world, the scenario that you're speaking of would be true. Unfortunately, this is not a perfect world, and every year we get more information from DESE in terms of what we have to do, how we have to do it, what people we have, who has to be retrained, who has to be replaced. And so I certainly understand what you're saying, and of course the whole town has been expecting that sooner or later we would see the bubbles disappear and see a more normal population through every grade in the school. But I think it's premature to hope that the bottom line on this discussion is, how do we save money? You know, because that's really, I think, where the thought goes. I would hope that the discussion stays centered on the quality of education that we supply to our kids, for the purposes of their future careers, and that we worry about, what the staff level is going to be once we've answered that question. And of course, we here on the school committee have that as our obligation of what it is we do, particularly as it's associated with budgeting. Obviously, the team here on my left are the ones that worry about the quality of the education, but certainly we get to look over their shoulder as that's happening. But the bottom line on this is it's premature right now, I think, to get into that other than what you've done, which is to focus our ideas as we go forward on that issue itself. So I think that's quite helpful.
I agree. I think we should be careful. Should not go back to 26, 27 again. We should try to keep it at optimal level.
I'm saying that because the complexity of the students in our classes are so much more, need more support than ever before, that if you're going to no longer think about growth in the way that we did, it's more about, can we fill in the support that's needed in each class? And so if it doesn't mean if it means making a bigger section of something, it means that support in that room is even greater. And only because this is the conversation we've been having for the last probably 4 or 5 years about the complexity of students today is so different than it was 10 to 15 years ago, that the need for either multiple teachers or co-teaching or smaller groups, whatever that combination is that lets us deal with that main issue, and it does seem to be an increasing concern. But at the same time, think about where in this enrollment piece you can maneuver one teacher from here to then become something else over here. I guess that's what I'm really saying.
I would also add that, especially from my reading of the student population, mental health, putting more money in mental health is becoming more and more important for our kids. For some reason, social media, whatever we may need to blame on, that area seems, kids nowadays needs more of that than when I was growing up, for example. And I think focusing just on teaching is good, but also mental health is very important to focus on. And if we can divert some of this towards attending to that, that would be of great help.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And, really what I was referring to is, 5, 10 years ago, what we taught, what we thought we had to teach is totally different.
Totally different.
Than what a student now graduating from high school is going to need. And, one of the things I think that's a real challenge for all of us here is simply, what is that going to be? And certainly the point you bring up, Raghu, of the needs of the student in this high-pressure society, created by all the things you mentioned, as well as things that we don't even know about yet. And that's our job. Our job here as a member of the school committee, as well as the administration, is to try to figure out what that is and bring the resources necessary, to the table to be able to supply them. And, like I said, I think it's premature. And of course, nothing is perfect. We do the best we can here. And I think, this team, as well as previous teams, have done a very good job for the kids in this town. And I hope we can continue to do that. And it's only because of the 2 points you guys brought up, which simply is the broader picture of what is it that we're trying to do here, and what concerns do we have as we do it. So I look forward to that. And David, you're on the spot soon.
So we certainly, I appreciate the range of conversation, and it's obviously the start of budget season, but I would echo the range of your comments, which is I see budget season as visioning season and program delineation and what it takes for us to maintain the quality of services. And I think that one of the things I respect about our work in this community is we've never created a sense of competition that somehow serving one group of students who learn a certain way has to short someone else. And so, I know something that people spoke to me about before I ever became a superintendent here was, what about your average child, that middle child that needs that high quality experience, that needs the school numbers to be right for them so they can learn in a class and thrive. And students who need the mental health support and the flexibility. We've built incredibly good bridge programs and have just added a bridge program this fall over at Gibbs. We've been very responsive and strategic, and we haven't created a sense of competition amongst our parents that somehow one quality of student is more relevant to us than the others. And I respect that in our work. Some communities will pit complex learners who require additional supports against others, and that somehow they've stolen money in the budget from other students. Like, that is not the cultural norm here. You see that we are proposing an additional L teacher moving forward to fall town meeting because we need that to provide and maintain quality service. This isn't a district where we're going to cut somebody else to find a way to move forward. We've had students who arrive with really complex language and broken schooling and trauma who require interventions that mean that we need to hire an L teacher to service them appropriately. And that's how we've done our work here, which is why I value you as a team. So we welcome the budget season. I think this is a good quality conversation. We'll get lots of opportunities for that. And I think it's good for Dave to get a chance to hear a little bit about how you approach budget season and how we do that as a team. The next time you see numbers, Dana will be making a proposal for staffing to you. And then you'll know that when we bring forward the budget, that there will be staffing proposals that are built around our visioning. So we're in the thick of it soon. So I just want to echo that these numbers, I'm comfortable with these class size numbers. I will represent that I am. Because a difference in 5 students in a classroom and the weight of the quality on that in a teacher's life and in a child's life in the classroom is substantial. And the amount of just conversational contact you get per day increases by 20% when you don't have those additional students to reach and have to meet their needs. And so I think, it's a very relevant conversation and one that I would encourage us to continue. So I look forward to that. So I feel like that completes enrollment discussion for now. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, yep. And
Perfect.
actually, that's a good segue into our next agenda item, which is looking at the schedule for the budget review, which David has put together for us, so we can kind of think about when we'll be having all these meetings and discussions about the budget, which of course in our district happens right after the first day of school. So.
I just wanted to, before I discuss, wanted to let everyone know that this is, as noted, it's a draft version.
Mm-hmm.
And while we try to stay static as possible, the dates are fluid. Where there's opportunity to do that. And again, as mentioned and as discussed, our biggest assessment, what we're going to look at this year is salaries and staffing, as that's the largest driver of the budget. So September 8th, I won't move through all of these, but I kind of want to highlight some of the bigger ones. September 8th, obviously today, presenting the draft calendar. The September 23rd through October 19th timeframe is essentially the defined timeframe for assessing the drivers, salary rollover, transportation, utilities, and ensuring that some of the smaller elements, pardon the expression, of the budget are, fall in line after we ensure some of the larger foundational pieces of the budget are put together. The September 23rd date that you see there is somewhat mythological. As Amber mentioned, that process is going on now. We've actually started that already. And thanks to my predecessor, we have a lot of suitable data to kind of start moving forward in the right direction. It's an endeavor, just being transparent about it, but it's something that's definitely achievable, again, but because it is the largest driver, we want to take our time to make sure that we have that number solidified before we move forward with some of the smaller categories. After that, we will do our best to communicate any changes, modifications, and as you know, The district does a good job of assessing budget and then making some strategic financial moves within the budget to make sure that we have the appropriate numbers. How that relates is to the use of grants, potentially moving staff onto grants where there's a need and where we see there's appropriateness. In addition to that, we do have some revolving funds that we can consider putting staff on, and then so on and so forth. So there's a lot of intricate pieces, and those will be considered through, between now and essentially the winter season. We will, as historically has done, keep the entire community, school committee, and all our constituents abreast of any changes we make. But again, a lot of this happens after the fact, once we set those initial drivers. A new experience for me is the speed of this budget. Historically, in other districts that I've worked in, budget doesn't get proposed until a lot later in the year. So that's something that's, to be honest, it's exciting, and I do think that it sets the district up for a strong assessment at the right time of the year to say, any potential changes, can modifications be made, adjustments, and that's not really to the numbers. It's more just being able to be.
It's the longest defense cycle ever, okay? Like, you turn the budget in, and until March, you're talking about it.
It's
a very long cycle of discussion.
The ability to be flexible and pivot, I think, is really what is beneficial for Westborough. So, in short, I empower everybody to kind of read through the timeline. The dates, for the most part, were tweaked to match the 2021 budget, as opposed to last year's. But again, we keep everything transparent. Anything relevant or notable will be brought to your attention. But thus far, we are moving in the right direction, and as I previously mentioned, we are already into it.
Yep. Thank you. So we'll take a look at the schedule. We'll mark down the dates that, for certain meetings.
Yep.
There are times when we touch base with the finance committee and our liaisons there, and definitely we'll have a lot of discussion about the budget before we bring it to the select board.
And just to address Lisa's comments, the budget, just through the initial conversations I've had with Superintendent Bach and Assistant Superintendent Daniel Meyer, is that, we consider student-centric. We really are whole child, average learner, students with disabilities, and ensure that, we're consistent, equitable, and provide equity in the budget. So we'll continue that, that strategy, and we'll apprise you of everything, especially any nuances. So we look forward to it.
Thank you. Any other questions about the schedule or the dates?
You have the 23rd is there, and that's also Budget Summit that night. So just to note, the Budget Summit, where that'll be our town gathering, where we kind of hold the high-level view of looking at that with the 3 boards. And I think a chance to, we have one more meeting before we go to that. And so Dave and I are starting to develop kind of the talking points that we think we might bring forward there. I don't think there'll be any surprises. I think you see a trajectory where you see some of the capital stabilizing, but certainly articulated, and it is all about kind of the rollover of core programming at this point, at least for the next, year to 2 years. When we project forward into the strategic plan, there will be other things that might spike that budget over the next couple of years, but certainly with anticipation and planning. Right now, I think we'll see as flat a budget as we can at a general rollover. So I don't think we'll be working with principals, but I don't see, we'll be looking at calling out those big ticket items, and we'll bring those to you on the 22nd, and then we'll be really sharing them the next day. And then we shifted the budget presentation style, where the principals really used to get the budget book the first day of school, which is not the best thing. So, we shifted that down a lot further, and it works well for them. We have leadership tomorrow, and we'll be talking through this timeline with them briefly, and we'll be off and running.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. So next on our agenda is to take a vote. It's a review that we need to do, an affirmation of a head injury policy. And so DESE requires a vote every 2 years to affirm that we understand this head injury policy, that we have it on our books, and that we are using it. And our director of athletics has suggested adding the word guardian in here to the policy, and otherwise feels that the policy stands as is, so just making sure it says parents or guardians.
We do a nice job with training around head injury,
Yep.
making sure that we hold the necessary information, working with our athletes to make sure they disclose to us. I mean, oftentimes that's the hardest part, is having athletes talk to you. I think our athletic trainer is very good. I think he's very respected, and the screenings are solid. So I feel like we have a good culture for that in the district, and I want to thank Johanna DiCarlo for getting things prepped to send to us.
Yeah, and I know that they've moved to using the SWAY program, which is, they were using it last year as an app to like check in, and so it's always at the forefront of every practice, every game.
And they stay current, which I
Yep.
really like.
Yeah. Any questions about the updates that we want to make for the policy?
No, I would just comment also on that is that we also have the Center for Student Success, which I know has helped several athletes come back from any sort of injury, head injury, or anything else where they might have to miss school or classes or anything like that. And so I know they do a good job of balancing the work and making sure that everyone knows their schedule and making sure all the teachers know what has happened to the student. And so just a little shout out to their work as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's been great.
thank you. It's nice to have, it really is short-term advocacy and intervention program to make sure that there's another person helping students really navigate stressful times.
So I'll make a motion
Yeah,
to
sure.
I'll make a motion to approve the head injury policy JJIF.
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor? All right, that's 5-0. So we will continue that, and we will make that update where it'll say parent/guardian. Another policy to look at is to update policy GBAA, which is a policy against harassment for employees and adult volunteers. We do need to update the name in here. We need to add David Gordon's name, our Director of Finance and Administration, because previously we had our other Director of Finance and Administration in here. As well as Andrea, who is the assistant to the superintendent, who has a very high level of detail, found that the superintendent's name is incorrect in this policy as well. So we're going to let Marianne off the hook, and we'll add Amber on her name onto this policy as well. So those were the updates that we
There
needed to
go.
do.
Happy to serve.
It's official.
My 8th year in the district.
Yep, and we thank Andrea for always finding
I
these
know, she's
little things that actually mean a big thing, and they're really important. So I'm grateful to her for
Can
her
I
help
comment,
with this.
as a general comment, can we leave off names and just keep the titles so that we don't have to update the
Yeah, I
policies
mean,
every time?
we did talk about that, and I think first, I don't know why, but maybe certain ones have to have the name on it. But Andrea and I did talk about that.
I think if you look at the policy, because you want to contact the person, it's nice to have their name there, and it's not that difficult for us to.
Especially
Update if we
around,
catch it,
especially
you know.
around this policy.
Yeah,
where
around certain things,
somebody's experiencing an issue of stress and they want to reach out. I think it's, but I would agree with you. I think we've neutralized a lot of them, so we
Mhm.
don't have those mistakes.
Yeah.
where I think there's certain ones where like the name is more helpful.
Yeah.
And I think for a policy like this, you need to have a person responsible for bringing these forward and for investigating any claim like that. So having someone's name there is a high level of accountability as well. So.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve the policy against harassment and discrimination for employees and adult volunteers, GBAA.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All right, all in favor? Okay, so we'll have Andrea make those updates to the policy. We'll get Superintendent Bach up to speed on that. So now we're up to an update on district proposals for ARPA, and this is the American Rescue Plan Act, and it is money coming to the town. And lots of town departments are going to be submitting proposals for how this money can be used and allocated as it relates to COVID. And as a town department, the schools has a few proposals in. And we had a meeting last night, just to kind of, a town finance meeting, just to look at the types of proposals that have come in and kind of get a sense on how this money is going to be allocated. So
Yeah, and I think more importantly, you know, what I really enjoy about leadership in Westborough is it was a process discussion where we were basically talking about sound process, thoughtful reflection, and coming at it strategically, which I think was appropriate. And the finance subcommittee, which is really this finance team, has the chair of both boards. It has then myself and Christy and key players of the finance leaders. And so it's just a good problem-solving group to function as a financial subcommittee on something like this, to put some structure around it so that when they bring it to broader boards, they have ideas that they can react to. And I would just say that all of the ideas that came forward are meaningful because our departments are really thoughtful. So I look forward to that. And so would you like, David and I thought we would split kind of sharing the two that we proposed.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So we've submitted two, both that represent HVAC, air quality and ventilation projects that fall well within the guidelines around the performance for equity across schools, as well as school safety norms and improved and ongoing ventilation projects. Certainly, I've heard many superintendents discussing that communities are leveraging this funding to cover a lot of the HVAC work. I just want to reiterate that Westborough is in a very high end of HVAC performance across all of our schools, and we are always looking to improve and finalize those. So I wouldn't say that there's a problem. Our ventilation systems across our schools are good. The project at Hastings is underway. We'll talk about that. And then, Dave, you want to take point on talking about the high school one?
Sure.
And I just want to say that with the ARPA, with the American Rescue Plan Act, it's specific about what one can use the funds for. So there are specific sort of categories and criteria for what towns can spend this money on as related to COVID and other broad categories too. So
Yes. Okay.
So part one of our ARPA proposal, without getting too in-depth, and you can read the memorandum that we put together through our submission. In short, it's to remove and to replace 2 rooftop chillers at Westborough High School. This essentially, as Amber mentioned, will provide improved performance of the HVAC system, which we have all learned not only helps in the removal of toxins, but provides cooling for students and fresh air that again allows for a safer place for students to reside and perform physical activity. The rooftop chillers, if you're not aware, they are excessive in terms of weight, and they will have an impact on the roof. So it will require some roof work to be done. There has been a feasibility study done to determine the work that needs to be performed on the roof in itself to have the new chillers put up there. In short, the assessments, total assessed costs will be about $1.5 million.
1.62.
1.5, yeah, and then what we did was, due to contingency dollars, anything that we find as we remove the roof or add the chillers or remove the other roofers, we, per the recommendation of our astute Stephen Durrett, we added 8% to that number just to ensure that we had any coverage that could seep into the direction of potential issues and concerns.
and I can speak to the 8%, that's been our experience with vendors at Fails who are reacting to COVID issues. And it may even be worse than that in the future because of the inability to find almost anything right now, particularly electrical stuff. Most of the electrical components that are used in the United States are made in Mexico, and they haven't gone back to work yet. So you can't get it. And so at this point, that's a conservative number for this purpose. In other words, not to be questioned, but it's certainly out there.
Thank you.
So just to add to that, two things. This is a project that's vetted through the capital project process that we organized and shifted last year, and Steve participated that, as did our director of buildings and grounds and Irene when she was here. So it's a project they've seen. It's a project we've done preliminary cost estimates on and feasibility studies. It's really project ready in that sense and falls clearly within the opportunity that should a project like this be funded, it doesn't end up falling through capital and coming into cost impact at the town level. So again, advantageous as all the projects that are getting discussed will be. We've long looked at the fact that because those units are at their end of life, to expand the capacity to air condition the 2 gyms meant that we needed to then go ahead and do a replacement of the units. So it lets us upgrade the overall quality of the units at the same time that we pick up capacity. So just to kind of benchmark for you the process over time. And then, again, that's in the queue and meets the guidelines for consideration. Why don't I go to the other one? So if you want to open up the next one, Daniel. The second project is a continuation of the discussion around the complexities of the Hastings repairs. So
Question?
Yep.
Just for my understanding, this money is already there with the town, and we have.
So the town has, thank you, the town has received 5.7 million. It can come in 2 major installments. You have to break it into phases. And so there is kind of both a phase 1 and a phase 2, and they have the money over multiple years. So you don't have to draw it right away, so there's time to be thoughtful on projects, to be able to stage it against also looking to see the ongoing effects of COVID's needs and impact in the community. So we're also kind of staging ourselves slowly, but that's the impact money that's coming forward. And that's for distribution across every project that's proposed in the town.
All townwide.
So all
projects.
townwide
Yeah.
departments submitted.
Got
These are the 2 that we brought forward. The second one, we currently have the ongoing repair projects at Hastings. Remember, several years ago, we had been in the fast track repair to have Hastings picked up, to have roof and interior windows, to do an envelope repair on that building, which would have included some other major renovations. It wouldn't have included HVAC, which we needed, so we pulled out from that project. We also tabled it because we gave that money back because we had so many projects that were coming through to the town, and we still would have had to pick up cost. So at that time, we set that project aside, and we gave that money. We gave back the opportunity to participate in that project because there were parts it didn't fulfill for us, which was this interior part where we had triggered with the use of that renovation, that whole cycle with the sprinkler system, with the amount of the building that had been renovated. And we've gotten into a bit of a pickle that we've discussed a couple times here, where based upon how much renovation work you do in that building, you trigger the need for ADA improvements, which are the bathrooms, the door swings, all of that type of stuff, which is expensive work. So currently, we received feedback when we put out the preliminary bid for the 2 projects we were going to do that we have money for. We were given money at town meeting, $2.2 million, to do the HVAC project. We were also given money to do the geothermal, which is complete, and we were given money to do the sprinkler project. The sprinkler project is underway right now, and we've currently put a hold on parts of that project because we want them to change the direction of some of that work, but it's actively underway. The second phase of that would then to be complete bid for the HVAC. And when they were giving us the preliminary estimates, they found that we were at a gap of 1.8 million. Now that it's actually closer to 1.5, and we've put 8% on that following the guideline that we used with the other proposal. So after we got the preliminary cost estimate from what GGD, the contractor, said the estimate would be for the HVAC project, we now have a gap. So this money would provide HVAC money to fill the gap so that we can use the voted warrant articles and this money to complete the HVAC project. The sprinkler project will complete. Then we will need to answer the question on the ADA compliance, and we've currently sought an estimate for the compliance to those projects, and it will become part of the discussion. Regardless, we need the money for the HVAC, and Steve and I have discussed a range of strategies by which we would stage that forward, depending upon what we learn with the ADA information and its cost. So that's a pretty, I hope that's a somewhat succinct summary of a complex process, and I would open it up for conversation.
I just have a clarifying question. So you're saying the ADA piece is not connected to this because it doesn't fall under the guidelines for this type of money, or it's separate?
We didn't put in for it.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
because we don't have that estimate yet. So I think when we're proposing things, it's best when we have a number, and we have the hard number on the HVAC based upon GGD's preliminary cost estimates to us. So that 1.8 million is a number that was given to us in their anticipated cost estimate. And the ADA is currently being assessed to give us an estimate. So there might be additional funds that need to be managed within that. But as we've seen with a sprinkler system, again, not to get too far into the weeds here, but being well-trained by Steve Durrett, you know, and feel free to jump in if I get off track, but you know, when we go out for bid at some point, who knows? Like when we went out for the sprinkler the second time, it came in much more advantageous. So if we went out for bid again, or we held on the bid for the HVAC till the spring, we might find that that number came down and it might not trigger the ADA. You know, so we want all the numbers to think about. The other thing we would have to do is break that HVAC project into stages and let the it's how many months it has to, you have to cycle through like a year and a half until you can do more project work. Like they either hold you to the window of time or the window of the percentage of the total value of the building. So it's complex, but there's options for us. But at this point, we can't move forward without that additional funding. And this opportunity, it's straight in alignment with the goals of the ARPA funds. It's improved the HVAC work. It also has an equity component to consistency across our buildings. So it's a strong proposal. And so I'm hoping that of the ones, we would say this is our number one for them to consider.
So who decides who gets the funds?
So that's a great question. So that's part of that whole process part, that this finance committee will start to try to think about what's the best strategy to bring those things forward. And I think that, you know all those people at the table. They're people that are going to try to leverage getting as much done as possible with the funds across as many boards as possible. So I think they're going to try to be very strategic. And I think when we left the meeting, Christie's plan was to try to come up with a draft process to put back in front of us so we could start to think about how to stage things forward.
And I was just going to say, it was interesting to hear, our town manager talk about these funds. This is like an unprecedented opportunity to have this money to invest into our community where we actually have a lot of choice in how we leverage the funds. So for me, it's exciting to think about. It's overwhelming because there's so much you want to do in your own town to invest in. But I would say that, like the things that the schools are bringing forward, it's not a surprise like what we would want to invest in, because it's what we traditionally want to be doing, is upgrading our facilities or, investing in the high quality services that we have here in Westborough.
I think for me, I would just add to the school committee and to any constituent watching is to manage expectations. You know, it gets a little blurry when you think about the $5.7 million. Then there's, you know, community-wide or town-wide, there's all kinds of suggestions. You know, right here, there's one for $2 million in itself. So I just wanted to, you know, have people manage their expectations depending on how the next step goes as to, you know, what could happen, is it partially funded? But again, I think our proposals fall in line with the ARPA request. I think our rationale support the need to do that, but again, I just wanted to manage expectations that there's a lot of constituents coming in with a lot of savvy ideas, so.
That's a really important point.
yeah,
Yeah,
so I just-
and the thing that I like about the team is thinking creatively. So are there ways to like fund half of a proposal and find the funds somewhere else, or stage it out over several years because we have opportunities to do that. So.
That's exactly. So this 1.8 million is to cover the gap, right?
Right.
We are already.
Yeah, the gap
they-
of the.
w- I mean, we are already approved for 2.2
Yep.
million
Yeah.
to spend.
Yeah.
What happens if this 1.8 doesn't get approved?
So we'll sit
to-
down and strategize, and there's multiple ways to take steps forward, but I would defer to Steve as the chair.
Well, one of the things that we have to keep in mind is the program that we were talking about, which was a MSBA grant, for which I think the total price tag was around 12 million at Hastings, which is a whole bunch of different parts, of which part of the problem with that particular grant was it was nowhere near as percentage-wise of that total. I think the MSBA participation of that 12 million was like 3.
Yeah.
Okay, so whereas the Fails is, with all the bells and whistles, the state is participating about 48%. The other thing that was strange about that program was it had a time date stamp. So if the roof was 25 years old at Hastings, they would pay for it. If it was younger than that, they wouldn't. So we were stuck with very large pieces.
Part of the roof that would
Yeah.
get fixed and
I
parked
mean, either we did, you know, a third or 2/3 of the roof, and the rest of it was just gonna disintegrate, or we had to come up with the money ourselves. And so these projects that we're talking about at Hastings are in fact parts of what was in that original scope, but we're dealing with them in the sense of being able to fund them over time. And in fact, the town has supported both of them, you know, based on the knowledge that we had at the time when we went before town meeting. In the interim, of course, we have the pandemic, which has changed construction costs quite a bit. And in fact, the Fields project was being driven by very large high school projects the MSBA was doing in the Commonwealth at the time, and the bid that we received for Fields was indicative of the fact that the construction industry was flat out. Meanwhile, later on in the program, when everything stopped as far as construction, and we went out to bid again the second time for the Hastings sprinkler, we dropped the price by, I think, 25%, give or take. And so that same scenario may happen when this finally comes to pass. But then let's just step back as things that the school committees presented to the town. 5 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, we presented the total capital cost of improvements necessary for school buildings. And it was a monster number, and that's because we, the town, the school committee, did nothing for 20 years. And so we're paying the piper in terms of bringing the projects back up to snuff. And I guess the parallel, one of the things that Amber brings up frequently is every time we've gone to the MSBA looking for support, one of the comments that we get back is how well this town has maintained what we have. You know, I mean, Fails, when you walk through it, even as an old building whose architecture no longer fits the curriculum of what we want to teach, it's really a fine building. It's almost too bad that we have to do what we're going to do to it. But and otherwise, we do have to make these improvements across the board. And even Mill Pond, which is, in my mind, something we just did yesterday, is now 20 years old. And so all of these things are aging, and we need to do these kind of projects. The fact that these two projects that we're talking about fit into the ARPA mandate is a wonderful thing for us in the town. And hopefully, you know, if you add up our sums here, it's 3.4 out of the 5.7. I would hope that, given the need of the fact that the school committee is responsible for 6 buildings, and the town side is only responsible for 3, I guess, right? This building across the street,
Senior center.
the seniors, 4, but they're nowhere near as comprehensive as the school buildings. Bottom line is, I don't think this is an unfair request against the 5.7. But then, just to answer the specific question that was put to us, what do we do? Well, we finish the bid process for the HVAC. We find out what the real total cost is gonna be, and then we figure out how we can parse that over time to get it done, because the HVAC is in pieces. You got the ADA, you got windows, you got the internal piping, and you have other bits and pieces that belong to this. So the bottom line is, we'll make do. If it's not there, we'll go back to the town and present our case. And I think, you know, as I just outlined in a few paragraphs, we have the history of saying, this is what we need. And if we can't afford it in 1 year, sometimes we can afford it in a future year. So that's what I would do, I guess, and recommended that the town try to do. Because ultimately, this is not for you and I, it's for our kids. And that's the most important piece of what we're trying to do here.
And I think as a committee and as a town, we have done incredibly well to stage our projects, to manage them over time, to look at the debt load philosophy we came up with a couple years ago, working very closely with a town manager and director of finance to really have a vision for how to accomplish. We continue to be an incredibly financially stable community due to the leadership of all of these boards working collaboratively. So it's an exciting time, continues to be, and the healthy repair of our buildings remains one of our major charges. So I feel that we're on track. It's exciting to be providing quality upgrades to Hastings. We did some very nice cosmetic lifts over there. Getting that building sprinklered means that all of our buildings have the same level of fire suppression available. So good things ahead. We'll continue to stage these forward to you. I think we picked 2 strong projects.
Yeah, and there'll be more coming from the town on the process and the decision-making.
Will we be getting updates on that, or?
Yeah, I think I think right now it's very, very preliminary, and they were just turned in, and I think right now being held in that committee until we kind of stabilize process. And then I think probably by the summit, I think they'll give you some overviews there. I think that was the town manager's goal.
Yeah, I think so too,
I
just to
mean,
give
it's
an
the
overview.
appropriate spot to kind of
Yeah.
like pull it forward and look at, you know, where we are with it, to give everyone an update at the same time.
Yeah, yep. Great. So next on our agenda is to vote to reappoint the superintendent to the Assabet Valley Collaborative Board. And our superintendent has been on this board for a long time, and this year she gets to serve as board chair. So
You better vote me in. I mean, you
we
can
have to
skip
vote
it.
her in.
I want to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I make a motion to reappoint Superintendent Amberbach to Assabet Valley Collaborative Board, and now as chair.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
I guess I'll comment that, you know, this whole process with Assabet Valley has been not only beneficial to the town of Westborough, and with the services provided, and the ability to bid for quantity, which saves us money, but also for other cities and towns around the area who have joined. I think the last one was Auburn.
Yeah,
And,
they've done very well.
And part, our accounting, I guess, for them, for that process and that project, and the collaborative have shown the viability of it versus others who have come and gone because they went bankrupt.
Yeah.
So.
We don't want that to happen while
No.
we're chairing.
No,
We do
I'm
not
sure you
want
won't.
that to happen. I'm gonna be keeping a very close eye on them.
Yeah,
So,
Yep.
yeah.
yeah. So, any other discussion before we take a vote?
I continue to hear about the quality of the programming at Assabet. It never ceases to amaze me when parents come to me and say, when we looked at this is a very common statement that has come to me.
The
is
collaborative or
it-
the?
The collaborative.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, the collaborative.
Yep.
Yeah, that there's always, I've never heard a negative thing from
Mm.
parents.
Mhm.
I'm like, that
So very-
is
yeah.
extraordinary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's wonderful. And they do a lot of professional development for teachers and,
They're
it's a really
definitely,
great.
they're definitely on a growth phase that's very positive, and to Lisa's point, I think innovated their programming against the feedback they've received, and partner with us really well.
Yeah.
As well as do a lot with transportation, which is kind of an
Mm.
invisible piece other people don't understand, but their coordination of van pool work is
Mhm.
huge.
Yeah, yep. All right, so all in favor? We'll take our vote
Aye.
now.
Just
All right,
Yeah.
yep,
I'd like to
5-0. And, Madam Chair, enjoy your,
Why, thank
your
you.
time over
Thank
there
you.
running the board. It's a good group, so it'll be good. Next is our, looking at our student activity account external audit report. This is just an update on a report that was prepared, I think, last spring, if I'm correct. It
So
just wasn't.
the numbers are as of June 30th.
Oh, June, okay.
As
Yep.
of this June 30th. If you, I can summarize this fairly quickly.
Sure.
If you scroll down, you can actually see the account balances as of June 30th. As everyone knows, what happened last year, there was not much movement in student activities and the normal standards of what student activity accounts get paid for.
Yes.
As we're all aware, the end of the year showed signs of promise, so there was some movement towards the end of the year, but again, not so much related to revenue, more so towards expenses, trying to normalize and bring back what was
Yeah.
lost due to the pandemic over the first months of the school year. So our current balance amongst the schools is about 74,000 based on the authorized limits of 100,000. Every 3 years, there is a formal audit done by Scanlon and Scanlon. That has been performed. However, we have not gotten the final report for them. We did hear, did have an opportunity to sit with their on-site auditor, and his recommendations were minor, if that, very small fixes. He was able to highlight some of the strengths that we did have, which included very strong segregation of duty related to managing the accounts. And he very much highlighted our reconciliation process, saying that we did a good job of making sure that checks and balances balances were checked, the bank statements. He did give a solid reference and recommendation to not only Central Office Assistant Director Paige Thomas, but said the school secretaries are really doing a good job, and I think that's through her guidance, not
Yeah.
only from her reconciliation standpoint, but also her managing the process and showing and training the school secretaries of how to do things. She does a good job with training, crossing her T's and dotting her I's, specifically related to numbers. So nothing alarming or eye-jarring here. We're hoping for a better year this year related to revenues, but also expenses related to student activity. But again, these are the numbers of June 30th. And as soon as the final report comes in, we'll let you know. I do not expect to see anything that's
And
alarming.
they do I would echo, they do a very nice job.
Yeah.
These are the accounts that, field trip stuff is running through, the yearbook payments, like, they're busy
It's a
accounts.
lot.
There's a lot of small amounts of money moving
Yep.
through those
$5.
in tiny pockets all stacked together. So they're busy accounts, and they require a lot of management in
Mhm.
order to keep them really well organized. So I think at the building levels, they do an incredible good job with this.
Yeah, and I know that, hopefully, maybe later this year, next year, we get back to that regular routine of field trips, and there's a lot of like prepayment of things that happen, then we collect payment from
Yeah.
students, so it's just a lot of
A lot of
little
moving parts in that, in those
yeah.
small numbers.
And
it's-
our school front office staff does a great job at managing all of this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, very, very good job.
Yep. yeah. So thank you for that update. Did you have a question?
No, if someone's looking at this, we've asked the questions last year about why there's a discrepancy between so much greater at the high school, greater at Mill Pond, and we were answered back then that the number of activities is so much greater at the high school.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it makes sense.
Yes.
And the Mill Pond is a larger school than Gibbons,
Yep.
Right.
so
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
But if someone were just looking at it,
Yeah,
Is it-
from an
Didn't
equity
anyone ask a
standpoint,
question?
it is a little kind of, the numbers can be misleading.
that's right.
But again, gauging them based on volume, they
And
are.
you, yeah, and you can make a proposal to raise the percentage, which we did at one of the buildings at one point, because they were kind of consistently over. So part of the audit is just to monitor, like, what's the general amount of money they're moving based upon their activities, and if something were to change, we would make a recommendation to raise that base. So I think what's most important about all this is a regular audit cycle, and Paige, as he said, goes to the buildings, sits with them, looks at their processes, makes sure all the W-9s are coming in, just all the stuff that has to happen, so there's good record keeping in Westborough, so that we know that schools are managing funds appropriately.
Yeah, I think it was Mill Pond that we decided to raise
Yeah,
it, only
we raised
because
it
we were
there.
running Mill Pond like a traditional elementary school, like
Yeah.
Fales or Hastings, but they do so much more in
Yeah.
terms of field trips, activities, like, so, yeah. All right, that makes sense. And actually, that is a great segue into our annual approval of student activities fees. This is something that we do every year as a school committee. And last year, we had lowered fees because of modified clubs and sports schedules, and just with COVID and things coming and going, it made sense to not, first of all, put in any increases to our fees, but also even charge the full amount. So this year, we're looking to return to a full activity season.
So we just
and the full
basically reverted
fees.
back to the standard amounts that
Yep.
we had run, and left everything kind of status quo for this year, which is an important part of just stabilizing a return. And then I think when I do the report to you, we'll be looking at clubs and activities in a more in-depth review later in the year as a report that I was gonna work on bringing forward to you. And so, there's been good discussion around whether or not Johanna DiCarlo and Gibbons have been talking about innovating intramurals there, doing different things. So part of a more comprehensive look, I think it's just something we're interested in. And then getting a profile on fees and what they're covering, as well as, the student experience across clubs. So kind of a little bit, nothing, not giant, but appropriate to come back and give you guys some data on profiles of information around our, these accounts. It does support a revolving account that supplements what we pay from budget, and gives us opportunity to maintain a lot of projects and things that we do to make sure that all of our fields, our buses, our clubs, our activities are all appropriately staffed and are able to have the things they need to enjoy their time. So
Yeah.
I look forward to presenting that to you. I think as of where things stand now, I certainly obviously recommend that this year stable to what we've done for multiple years is appropriate in the upcoming year.
Do we want to remind people that those who cannot afford the fees, that
Yep.
there is a
Yep.
process for financial need at every school, and that families that are in need of that kind of support can apply?
Thank you,
Within.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, there are multiple opportunities for students, parents, teachers who come forward and definitely make sure that they work very hard to make sure students they know and work with closely are participating in things and signing up, and then supporting them to let them know that the financial piece is not a burden, in the sense of we want full access for student participation as wide as it needs to be.
There's a number and a email address they can
Yeah,
contact.
Yeah.
I think it's also to,
Can you scroll down a
note,
bit?
I think it's also to note those,
Yeah.
that's a confidential
Yes.
process.
Yep.
So
It
people
is a
can feel free.
confidential process. But it's not a barrier for participating
Yep.
in clubs and sports and activities and things like that. And Steve, were you gonna say something, or are you gonna?
Yeah, I was. My question is, since it already exists and has been there, do we need to take any action? I don't think we do.
I think we just have to do an annual approval of the student activity fees, whether we're going back to the old fees or not. We just do need to vote that we looked at them and approved them.
So on that basis, I'd move that we return to the 2019-20 schedule,
Yep.
correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
For activity fees.
Thank you.
Second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Sarah. Any other discussion on the student activity fees? All right, all in favor? All right, so those are approved. And that brings us to the end of our agenda. The next meeting of the school committee will be on Wednesday, September 22nd. Motion to adjourn.
So move.
I'll second.
Thank you, Raghu.
Thank you.
All in favor? All right, our meeting is
You should
adjourned.
enjoy our short meetings in the beginning before we get
I
into the
know.
heavy. These are the warm-up meetings. And Andrew, we always remind you that if you have like a test the next day, or you've been like, okay,
Yeah.
but you need to.
It's a great
We get into
experience.
We get into some good politics. Here we go.
Yeah, I did a quick skim last week. Today.
That's good. We'll make sure, you should make sure you keep adding in.
But
It's really
seriously, if
helpful.
you do have like events or, you know, you can come to the first part of the meeting and like Bethany used to
Just
scoot
text
out to
one
go
of
to
us, yeah.
practice.
We
and
started
he's-
this day early at like 7:30 this morning. I already had a meeting.
That's good.
That's right.
We have, we need Mr.
Not at the
Callahan to
loading
weigh in
dock,
that you
though.
need to get off the loading
Don't
dock.
meet at the loading dock.
I'm sure they can do better than that.
Dumpster.
That's a good way to get a change.
I know, we're proud